please use the chat box for questions or comments. And obviously, along with the theme of this conference, be respectful to everyone involved. So we'll go ahead and get started. Amy and Jeremy with Edible Alaska talking about Pitch It Like You Mean It and how to become a contributor to the magazine, and hopefully a little bit about the magazine. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Amy, to get us started.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm Amy O'Neill Hauk. I am co-publisher with Jeremy Pataki of Edible Alaska. I actually live in Cordova, Alaska, which is on EAC land. Today, I am visiting Juneau. So I'm sitting here on Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian land, so Gunishchish. And I'm happy to be here and so inspired by all of the presentations that we've seen the last 2 days. We're gonna just tell you a little bit briefly about Edible. We're gonna talk about pitches, which means, how do you become a contributor to the magazine? And then we're gonna turn it over to questions. We're really hoping to have more of a conversation. Encourage you at that point, please, feel free to turn your camera on if you want. Definitely use the mic. We're happy to hear your voices when it's time. So take it away, Jeremy. Jeremy, I think you're still muted.
I'm Jeremy Pataki. Is this okay? Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy. I'm a co-publisher of Edible Alaska along with Neil Hauk. I'm connected to you from McCarthy, Alaska, out here in Otna country, where I live much of the time, usually in Anchorage when I'm not here. Thanks so much for joining us. Edible Alaska is a quarterly print publication with a robust online presence whose mission is to tell the story of food and drink in Alaska. We're coming up on our 5-year anniversary. Amy and I have been owners of Edible for the last couple of years. And Edible Alaska is a member of Edible Communities, which is a group of about 80 locally owned print publications in the US and Canada. Combined, our readership is almost 20 million people. Our current print run, Edible Alaska's current print run, is 8,500 copies per issue, plus digital editions that we publish as well. So if you haven't seen the magazine, look around. There's free copies pretty widely available throughout the state. Mostly distributed via our advertisers, and we have a lot of ways you can grab copies that you can find out about on our website as well. This has been such a great, inspiring couple of days. Lots of reminders at this conference about all the ways that, needless to say, food is essential. Food connects all of us, and the people that grow and produce and harvest and catch and process and ship and cook and serve and deliver our food. So we're really passionate about the foodways and are really thankful for the network of our contributors, advertisers, and all of the people doing the work of serving Alaska through food. Of course, we would be nothing without our storytellers, without our contributors, the writers and the photographers that make all of our issues what they are. And we're super stoked to have this chance to encourage you to get in touch with us if you might want to contribute, and to share ways that you can do that, and kind of what we've learned about how those conversations could be most fruitful. So Amy, I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, so the title of this session is called Pitch It Like You Mean It. So we probably first just want to establish what is a pitch. A pitch is a way for you or anyone who wants to become a contributor to tell us your idea. So a pitch is not a full article. It's basically, in our day and age, it's an email, and it tells us what is the idea. And we're going to go into some detail about what makes an effective pitch as far as we're concerned, what helps us figure out the important things about your story. And we're going to start that. I'm going to share the screen with a couple of slides. Jeremy's going to just take a minute and tell, are you guys seeing that, by the way, Jeremy?
Yes, we are.
Not yet.
Awesome. So we're going to start by just telling, giving you a little bit of a view of a couple of pages in the magazine and talking about, ways you might be inspired to send us your ideas. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Okay, I'm actually not seeing the screen. There we go. So we thought we'd just show a sample table of contents and the contributor page there. You can see that we have both feature-length stories as well as departments that some of which are in every issue, some kind of come and go. And we also list any recipe that occurs in the magazine up in the table of contents as well. We really put a lot of emphasis on the editorial side of the magazine. The magazine is not a vehicle for, it's not a vehicle for advertisements. People, like the ads. We consider that part of our content. We kind of take a curatorial approach to those, but we really put a lot of energy into the editorial side of Edible Alaska. There are writers and photographers that we work with on a regular basis. And we also work with a lot of people that are kind of, have a one-off. Our contributorship, covers the state. We have, content from the Arctic all the way down to Southeast, contributors from, everywhere. And really try to and want to have as diverse and inclusive of a masthead as possible. I'm getting some funny internet stuff, so you want to advance that slide maybe?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you're seeing it yet. You got it, Jeremy?
I think so. So here's a couple, a couple spreads from a column that is written by S. Hollis Mickey, who works at the Anchorage Museum, called Culinaria Obscura, which is a place where she kind of launches a point of a document or a photo, something that she has come across in the Anchorage Museum archives, and then uses that to sort of open up and unfold a story. In this case, she was writing about grocery shopping in Anchorage like 100 years ago. And there was this collection of grocery store receipts. Just kind of wanted to show this spread. You can see the first, it's a 4-page story, kind of feature length for us. But, we've got kind of on the left there, the first page, and then facing that, this kind of collage of those historical documents that she's writing about and following up with a recipe. So we have some great designers that really have put a lot of heart and soul into creating sort of the aesthetic and kind of visual identity of Edible Alaska, and that's something we have had a lot of good feedback on. Some of our contributors, write stories and shoot them and are great photographers. Some people have photographers that they work with on a regular basis. Sometimes people lean on us to come up with the visuals for the story. And anyway, here's just one little glance at how this one story appeared in print and in the digital. Want to go forward?
Mm-hmm.
This was a story that ran a number of issues ago, written and shot by Bethany Sonsini Goodrich out of Sitka, who's as many of you know, a fantastic photographer and activist and writer. And this story actually won an award among the national edible communities. Kind of a really fantastic story about a culture camp down in Cake, Alaska. That's built around traditional foods. Beautiful to read and beautifully shot and beautifully laid out.
So, I mean, as you can see, there's a lot of diversity. We have some people send us straight recipes or recipe in a photo. Some people pitch feature-length stories that, you know, dive deeply into an issue. And, you know, some people we send shorter columns or shorter pieces that are, you know, have kind of all kinds of different ideas, more straightforward. We have, you know, about wild foods, about local places to eat, all kinds of stories. But really what we're looking for when we get a pitch is kind of what's the angle? What is the story that you're trying to tell? You know, you try and think about it like, you know, what's the narrative versus what is it about? You could say, well, it's about this local restaurant, but really to make a good edible story, it's the story of, for instance, the story of the founders and the, you know, the circumstances, their challenges they had to overcome to become successful. So that's kind of what we want to hear. What is the story there? And then why is it timely? Why is now the time to tell that story? It's a good thing to include when you send us a pitch. And why are you the person to tell this story? Or even before you pitch, something to think about is, is it my story to tell? That's something that we're really cognizant of, you know, in a state with such a really rich and diverse you know, culture. We want to make sure that we are elevating the voices of the people whose stories are being shared. Actually, one example of that we are really proud of is that the same writer, Bethany Goodrich, last year worked with a young Alaska Native writer to do a story about shellfish in Sitka. And so she mentored that writer, who was also a photographer. They shot pictures together. She wrote the story, and Bethany just provided some expertise, and it was a great first opportunity for her. She had just graduated high school, actually, to become a published writer. Which actually leads me to say that we want to hear from you, regardless of your previous experience. You know, we want to see that you have writing experience, but we're not expecting every contributor to be a professional writer. Jeremy, feel free to jump in anytime too.
Maybe I'll just add to that. Maybe I will just mention that, you know, both Amy and myself have backgrounds in creative writing. And actually, you know, like I mentioned earlier, one aspect of putting a lot of love into the editorial process is, you know, includes working with writers and helping develop stories as needed and things. And so, like she just said, I'm just echoing that sentiment of, you know, not being shy if you've got a good idea, but are concerned about your chops. We would love to work with you potentially.
Yeah, and there's also actually all sorts of ways around that. Like maybe you just have a burning story you want to tell, and or you know someone who has this amazing story, and neither of you are writers. You know, we do matchmaking. We turn a story like that maybe into an interview where a writer then becomes, you know, the person becomes both the subject and a contributor, which is happening in our upcoming winter issue. a story about East Chester Flats that we're really excited about. So here we're just some nuts and bolts about things that are useful to have in your pitch. How long are you imagining? Is this, how much space are you thinking that your story will need? You don't have to know this. We can kind of, if you do know, that's great. If you don't, we can kind of quiz you a little bit and ask you questions that help us figure that out. And if you can describe what you imagine is the visual story that you're telling, what images do you imagine having, and will you be taking the photos, or do you know someone who will? We work with illustrators all the time. Do you think it would require illustrations? If so, what are you imagining? What season is your story about? Edible Alaska publishes 4 print issues per year, and we are very seasonal in how we think about things. We also assign stories sometimes more than a year out, and often at least a year. So when you're in a current season, this is a great time. For instance, it would be a great time to be thinking about and pitching us stories for next winter, because now's the time when the things that you might be eating and cooking and thinking about with respect to food, Alaska foodways in winter, or shooting pictures of, then that would become useful next year. And it would be great for us to know that that is coming down the pike. And then writing samples. So if you have published clips, feel free to send them. Obviously, you don't need to send a deluge, just a couple. And specifically, if you have something, if you have a writing sample that shows us that you can tell the kind of story that you're proposing, that is super useful. So if it's, investigative, journalistic, then, if you can show us something like that, that's fabulous. If it's a personal essay, and you show us something like that, then that is helpful as well. I'm going to, just stay in touch with us in all the means possible. Ask us questions. We're going to turn this into a conversation right now, but after this is over, contact us, via email, but any way that you want. Read the magazine. That's one of the best ways to get ideas. You can find all of the articles from almost the whole 5 years of the magazine on ediblealaska.com, and there's a nice handy search box there. So if you have an idea, it's great to look it up and see if we've done something similar before, which isn't like if you wanted to write about halibut and we already wrote about halibut, that doesn't rule it out, but it helps you figure out what's your angle, right? Because you're not going to pitch us the same story. You'd have to pitch us something different. And if you got one of the wonderful swag bags that the conference delivered, you'll find that the fall issue is there, and you can check that out. And winter will be landing in Alaska at the very end of this month. So we'll hope that you'll get your hands on that as well. I'm going to stop my screen share, and we're going to open it up for questions, either via the chat or out loud. We've got about 10 minutes left, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so if anyone has questions that you'd like to throw out there, you can unmute yourself or chat. You should be able to all unmute yourselves. And if you haven't had a chance to read an edible, you should find one. They're a great magazine.
I guess maybe to prompt your questioning, I would ask you what brought you here today. What were you hoping to find out?
Oh, here's some chat questions.
Awesome. Okay, Nicole. So yeah, one of the things that we would say is normally don't send us a fully completed story. That doesn't mean that never happens, but you don't have to write something in advance in order to necessarily get it, get it considered for the magazine. And so we don't want you to necessarily do work that's unnecessary, but if you had something that you had been saving, you could either send it to us or you could pitch it first and then send it after we had an email conversation about it. Thank you, Robbie. Yes, if you go a special subscription price for conference attendees, absolutely. We have actually one of our best deals ever for just for conference attendees. If you go to our virtual exhibit booth right now, you can get a coupon with a QR code that's for a $20 subscription, and they're normally 28 bucks. The conference links. I don't think we are linking to anything right now, but go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just spotted another question that came in about our pay rate and for per word and photos. It's somewhat variable, you know, with different types of stories. But just a ballpark, I would say most of our feature length stories are usually clocking in around 1,500 to 2,000 words, sometimes longer. And it's just as a very ballpark baseline that can go up or down. We're usually paying around 400 right now for those, inclusive of photos, whether those are sourced by the writer or us. And then shorter pieces are usually more in the 750 to 800 word range, and you know might pay like 100 or more. But significantly less, of course, than the feature ones. And photography is a little more case by case. It's harder to throw out sort of a baseline ballpark for various reasons. But I think the best way for a photographer to get paid would probably be to pitch a photo essay. An example, for example, being Ben Huff's that was looking at the beginning of the pandemic all those months ago.
And there's also a question in here about the competitiveness of in the pitch field.
Are we swamped? No, I wouldn't say we're swamped. We have definitely enough pitches. But we are always seeking new voices. So I would never discourage anyone. And because we book story, we're not a newspaper. We don't have to get your story printed. If we got a submission and we were full and we liked it, we could book it out for, the next 18 months out or whatever. So I wouldn't let that discourage you. The fact that we have a lot of interest in people being contributors. We definitely want new voices all the time.
For sure. And I would just add that, like there's an exception to every rule. Like we are booking, some things get cut or get pulled, and sometimes we, like this Jew, fairly late in the game, decided to go 48 page, which is normally the magazines are 40 pages long plus cover, and we upped that to 48, which created a little more space. And so, some stories are very timely and could only work in the winter issue or something like that, and others are more sort of evergreen. So also the answer to the question, I think, depends on the nature of the story as well.
And Claire says, are you interested in stories that have a historical bent or are kind of an ethical investigation, or just stories about current food-based activities? No, definitely history or ethical investigations, environmental stories. We're interested in everything food related in Alaska. People, we're interested in stories of the people who make the food and all of the things involved. And we don't shy away from tough issues either. So definitely tell us what you're thinking.
One thing, we kind of, sorry, go ahead. I've got a delay out here.
No, it's all right. I was just filling space.
Well, I was just going to, kind of ruminate on that tension that Amy and I talked about a lot between wanting to publish stuff that's, not just interesting or entertaining or informative and useful, but kind of germane to, broader cultural conversations, but having, having only 4 issues a year that, like we talked about, often we decide the themes and even, assign stories like a year or more out in advance. And so that makes it harder to be kind of on top of things. I mean, we were joking around today about the New York Times, tomorrow's New York Times, given the events of the day, cover would be, front page would be really fantastic to have. By the time they created the paper edition today, it was sort of too late to have the big headline. So even on a daily basis, newspapers deal with that. We only publish quarterly. So that's something that we are always sort of navigating and trying to sort of forecast, like, okay, how, like our spring issue is themed around food sovereignty, food security. And just by virtue of having to plan that content like months in advance or so, it's just by nature going to be a little different than it might be if it was all quickly developed. But we're doing more and more online, and we'll be working more and more to sort of supplement the print content there. And often, can work with contributors to do that and to, boost their own content. And things like that. Bethany Goodrich out of Sika, like she's done Instagram and then Instagram after this came.
I think we lost Jeremy there for a minute, but he was saying that Bethany done some Instagram takeovers because she's supported also by the Sitka Conservation Council, I think they're called, and so we've collaborated with them, and that's another thing. We've done a lot of collaboration with other organizations to tell different stories. Lisa is asking, how do we pick recipes? And I would say a lot of that is seasonal. It's based on the theme and the season and what people are sending us. We will sometimes solicit recipes if we have an idea that we're thinking about, or, last fall, our theme was broadly about culture, both in the sort of, in the people sense of the word and in the food, so fermentation sense of the word. So we were definitely on the hunt for particular kinds of recipes. This upcoming issue is a drinks issue, has more recipes than we've ever printed. And, not just beverages, but things that go great with beverages. And so we definitely kind of put the feelers out. We keep an email list of writers. We don't contact you very much, but you're welcome to ask to be included on it. And occasionally we will shout out and say, hey, do you have an idea about X, Y, or Z?
I just threw that email address that would be best for that into the chat, info@edibleak.com. Things sent to that address land in both Amy and I's email inbox, and anybody that wants to be added to the editorial or the writers list, basically, we're happy to add you.
I think just one last question in the last 2 minutes to go. Just talking about if there's a way to find out about upcoming themes.
Yeah, that would have been a great thing for us to have a slide about, which we didn't. But I can tell you that our upcoming themes right now, spring, which is pretty much already fully assigned, is a food justice and food sovereignty issue. Summer is the green issue. So you can, and our themes, we create them to be as broad as possible. So, when we created the green issue, we were thinking of growing but also environment, sustainability, all sorts of things that go along with that. Fall is the workforce issue. And right now, winter is tentatively gatherings.
Those gatherings that everyone's missing. All right, well, I'm sure you'd be willing to have people follow up at the info@edibleak.com if there are any further questions or interest. And I see Callen, our next speaker, is here in the room. So thank you, Amy and Jeremy. Hopefully you're going to hang out in the room or catch some of the other great stuff happening. But
thanks so much. Yeah.
Thanks so much for having us, and thanks everyone for your interest in edible. Take care.
All right, well, we'll just move right on in at 4 o'clock to Callen, and glad to see you on. We have Callen with the Chaga Co-op here to talk about sustainable chaga harvesting. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to start off by saying that I'm honored to be here. I feel very underqualified, but I'm very excited to share everything that I've learned and everything that I know. And I want to give an open invitation to anybody who's listening to chime in at any point on the chat. And hopefully if I can wrap up in time, we can discuss some things at the end. If any of you guys know something I don't, I would love to learn. I'm not here to just teach. So yeah, I'm just super inspired by the whole conference. I'm excited to collaborate with all these people that I've been meeting, and I guess I should talk about who I am. My name is Callen Christensen. I live in Fairbanks, Alaska, and I was a transplant at age 5. I was brought up here with my parents, who have since left. I've decided to stay, and these are the traditional lands of the Dana people of the Lower Tanana, and I'm entirely grateful to the land for giving me the inspiration that it has and allowing me to put my roots down. I love my home, and I'm very excited to share everything that I've been learning about my home and the plants and the mushrooms and the medicines that are all around us. So I'm gonna, can you guys see my face? I guess you probably couldn't, or no?
I could see it fine.
Okay, cool. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen now and go to my presentation here. Oops. Cool. So, yeah, I guess it's loading. Okay. So I took the word artificial out because I realized that, you know, we are a part of the ecosystem, and everything that we are doing could be considered natural. And I don't think artificial really has a good connotation to it. And what I'm trying to do is actually keep things natural and hopefully preserve this wonderful medicine and food. So this was an idea that I've had thinking about for a while, and I've just started this summer to do research on it. But to start, I want to tell you about how I learned about chaga, and that is, I was 18. I'm 25 now, and I was learning about, you know, modern agriculture, you know, pesticides in our food, you know, glyphosates, heavy metal toxicities, just like this overwhelming amount of information that was rather disheartening. And so I was looking for solutions, and ended up coming across some online article about chaga, and I saw a picture of it and said, wait a second, that's growing right outside my house. And so I went outside. I sure enough identified it, took a piece off, and I boiled it up and I drank it, and it felt amazing. And I was like, wow, this is exactly what my body needs. Like, I ended up drinking probably like a gallon or 2 gallons by the end of that week. And at the end of that week, ended up having like a really profound dream that to me was very significant and kind of set in stone that this was something that I should be working on, understanding, learning, and sharing with people. So I tried to reach out to some of the other people in the industry who already had companies harvesting it and selling it, and didn't really see eye to eye with many of them. Some of them, it seemed, weren't as interested in education or understanding the medicine or the compounds therein, more just how to sell the most of it, and not actually teach people how to brew it properly. So a lot of it was going to waste. And then I ended up working with another individual that, you know, had a pretty sizable harvesting operation that he was offering to pay people. And through him, I met other people that were not being paid fairly. And as a result, I harvested some chaga for him and got ripped off. And these other people who were Laotian families, I'm not sure if they were citizens or if they just didn't have legal recourse, but they ended up getting ripped off a significant amount. And I'd roped my friend Joshua into coming and harvesting with me, and as a result, he got ripped off as well. And it was kind of this sad thing. It was like, man, we're out here like trying to harvest this like wonderful, powerful, nutrient-dense food medicine, and now there's all this sketchiness associated with it. And it was his idea to start a co-op, which would be that the people who are harvesting it will receive the majority of the profit that it gets sold for, rather than this system that is currently going on where people just try to salvage value from each other, buy low, sell high. But in this case, if we all shared the distribution network and we all shared the processing effort, we can all share the profits. We don't have to try to, marginalize one another. So for those of you who don't know, chaga has some pretty wonderful health benefits. It's considered an immune modulator because it not only boosts the immune system, but can also help balance the immune system, which would be needed if you have autoimmune disorders. And it's also considered an adaptogen, which is just a general term for any herb that helps the body adapt to stress, different types of stressors. And then it's considered a tonic because it's considered fairly safe to be drunken every day, and has the highest concentration of a molecule called superoxide dismutase, which is an anti-aging compound that is found in some of Earth's longest living organisms. And that is one of the places that it gets its anti-aging properties from. And it is extremely nutrient dense in these long chain sugars that are very good for our immune system. So it has a lot of this research that's been done on cancer cells that shows that it's good for fighting cancer, and a lot of rat studies that have been done in the United States. But to date, there has not been any clinical studies done in the US. I believe it has been done in other countries, but it's very hard to get funding for wild foods research clinically in the United States. My experience is I've been drinking it for 6-7 years now, and I don't get sick anymore. I've not gotten the flu, a sniffle, cold, anything for 6 years. Granted, I also drink water that's clean, and I try to avoid processed foods, but I find that very amazing, and I'm grateful, very grateful. So there are some contraindications people should know about that. It naturally lowers your blood pressure. So if you're already taking, statins or something that lowers your blood pressure, you could double dose. I had an old boss that said when he drank too much chaga, he got dizzy. That's because he was taking pills for high blood pressure already. That being said, it also naturally lowers your blood sugar, which means it could be a natural alternative for someone who's pre-diabetic. But obviously talk to your doctor about this. I'm not a professional. I have just learned about this, and I'm excited about it. I wanted to share it and encourage everybody to do their own research and not just take my word for it. And then lastly, it's very high in a compound called oxalic acid, which is also found in foods like kale and spinach. And if you drink too much, you could be at risk for kidney stones. So moving on. There is something happening in the United States right now called the shroom boom. A lot of people are recognizing that medicinal mushrooms are very powerful and very safe, and they are getting commercialized very quickly. And because of this, chaga is getting harvested very rapidly, not just here, all around the circumpolar regions of the earth, anywhere birch trees grow, essentially. So the thing is about chaga is it can't be cultivated in a laboratory like other medicinal mushrooms. It only grows on living birch trees. So a lot of the threat is that it will be harvested before it has a chance to reproduce. And a lot of people don't understand chaga's reproductive cycle. I've only just been learning the last few years. It only fruits once after it's a parasitic birch fungus. So after it kills the birch tree, it produces the true chaga mushroom, which is the fruit body, the reproductive mechanism. So chaga mushroom is a misnomer because you're not actually eating the mushroom. You're eating a stored food mass. So what chaga is doing is it is digesting all of the medicinal compounds of the birch tree. Everything about the birch tree is medicine. It's a wonderful, wonderful, beautiful tree. And the chaga is taking all the sugars and the acids and the medicinal compounds from it and concentrating it into this conch. And that's what you see, what people harvest and brew into a tea. That is the chaga. So I think a big part of understanding the key to being sustainable with chaga is to understand its life cycle. So what you see in the forest is this. I just want to double check, make sure. Can everybody see my screen? Can everybody see my face still? I only see my screen. Is everybody hearing this okay?
Yes.
Coming through good. I can see your slides and hear you just fine.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Cool. So yeah, the picture on the left here is the sclerotia, or the conch, the stored food mass. And then over here is what happens when you cut into it. And this is a good example of what's considered to be a sustainable harvest, because you haven't dug into the tree to hit the bark. There's still some of the chaga mycelium there. And what this will allow it to do is to grow back and leave more for other people to harvest. And theoretically, the chaga will still get a chance to reproduce. So when you're walking around in a birch forest, a lot of times you'll see this. You'll see these dead trees that have snapped right where the chaga is growing. So that means the chaga did its job. It has, weakened the tree to the point where, a windstorm comes through, a snowstorm, and the tree breaks. And so theoretically, the next season, you find this. And so this rather, innocuous looking split open bark section is the actual chaga mushroom. And what you see is this thick mat of spore producing tubules that release the actual chaga spores here. And this was taken this summer, and this is kind of the early in the season. You would see this and then later on in the season, if you came back, this whole section would be covered in the white spores that are produced. So this next slide is a video of a chaga fruit body that I found last summer. So it has split open the bark, and underneath it's released the mushroom. There's the original chaga, which is the food storage for that, and it's split all the way up to the top. And that is all the tubes that are producing the spores. And all right, stop play again. Next slide. So after that, they kind of dry up, and you'll see this, which is a lot more common. This is an expired fruit body. It's no longer producing viable spores. You can see the chaga up there, but if you pay attention, you'll see a lot of this. And if you're in a birch forest and you see this, this is a good sign that there's chaga nearby. So if you look closer, upon closer inspection, this is another old fruit body. You see these little egg sacs, and I believe that these are the egg sacs of beetle, because I read an article in Fungi magazine saying that the beetles like to lay their eggs in the chaga mushroom. They're attracted to it. They come, they eat it, they lay their eggs there. It's a good food source. And so that is a potential vector of reproduction for the chaga mushroom, is that these beetles that come in, they carry the spores around and burrow into other trees. But the other thing you see are, here's that fruit body that I filmed before. I pulled a piece off and found this, a little beetle larva. And so this was like, I think, July. You know, so at this point, it's already hatched and it's eating. Okay, this is very interesting too. When I was sweeping up a big pile of kind of like chaga pieces that had hit the floor when I was doing some processing, I found this guy, and he was extremely intent in burrowing down underneath the chaga. Even as I tried to kind of pull him away, he just kept trying to go down into the chaga. So I actually pulled a piece off that he was resting on, and I set it outside, and he continued to just not separate himself from it, and just tried to go underneath it, and was not interested in doing very much anything else other than hanging out with this piece of chaga. So to me, this is a significant observation showing the intimate relationship between these two species. Now, the other thing you'll see in these expired chaga fruit bodies are these little holes. And I believe these are produced by the woodpecker that is coming in to eat the beetle's larva. And this could easily be another vector by which chaga reproduces. So chaga is, you know, symbiotic with these, it's parasitic to the birch tree, but it's symbiotic with the beetle, it's symbiotic with the woodpecker, and that comes and eats the beetles and helps spread its spores into other trees. And so this is another thing I saw this summer. Look at all those holes. That is a living birch tree. And you can hear probably the woodpecker, he completely hammered those trees. So these trees very well could bear chaga in the next few years. So, as the saying goes, observe nature, then copy her. This is also an interesting post that I saw. David Spar wrote an article for Fungi magazine a few years ago about the reharvest of chaga. Since the article was written, I was able to get a third harvest this year. The tree finally died, and the elusive, rarely found chaga fruit structure was found right below the conch. Awesome. So you can see here that there's black still there. That means that he didn't dig too deep into the orange portion that exists underneath. And because he was doing it respectfully, the chaga still produced the fruit body that down there underneath. So that's a good example of what can be done. Now, I've also seen it happen where chaga does not reproduce. I've seen people dig too far into it. I've done it myself, and the tree eventually died. And so far, there's not been a fruit body yet. So I propose some research, and I am not affiliated with, a university. I don't have any traditional training in how to conduct data collection, but this is my plan. And if anybody wants to jump in and help me with this project or contribute to data collection, or just has any ideas or suggestions, I would be happy to hear from you. But the goal of the research is to better understand chaga's life cycle, the impact of different harvesting techniques, and to assess the potential of manual inoculation as a way to avoid overharvest or extinction. So I looked into this, and there are other companies, one in Finland and one in Estonia, that are actually culturing the chaga mycelium onto birch dowels and inoculating them into trees to produce chaga, doing the role of the beetle or the woodpecker. However, I asked them to share some of their data, if they had any long-term data that they had collected, videos or pictures of what the mycelium looks like on the petri dish, and I was not given any information. And in fact, both of these operations are done commercially. So what they're doing is they're trying to pitch this to private landowners and saying, hey, before you cut down all your birch trees and sell it for firewood, let us come in. You can buy this mycelium from us. We'll inoculate your birch trees, and then in 5 to 6 years, you can harvest them and sell the chaga to us. Then you can cut down your birch trees. So it's not even being done from a perspective of conservation, and because of that, there's not any long-term data that's being collected. So I propose 2 separate tactics. One is to actually collect the fruit body that I showed you that video of, and just immediately, maybe drill a small hole into the birch tree and plug it with those chaga spores. Also, I've been culturing the chaga mycelium, and I have it colonized on grain spawn right now. I haven't transferred it to birch dials yet, and then inoculate. So I've been collecting some GPS coordinates of different trees, and I'm collecting all this data that you see here, the elevation, the size of the tree, the size of the specimen, time of year, and whether I fully harvested it, I partially harvested it, or I just left it alone. And also we will be keeping track of all the trees that are inoculated. That is the picture of, so any of you, if any of you are out there harvesting chaga and you find one of these fruit bodies, collect it. Go around, maybe inoculate a couple birch trees, obviously not all in one area, that would create an imbalance, but just, this could be a potential way for anybody to promote the abundance of this medicine in your area. So this is actually some chaga mycelium that I got successfully to run on a sterile petri dish. You can see it right there. And then that wedge is a wedge that I cut out and transferred to another petri dish just to make sure that I had a sterile culture. And then this is from the Finnish Forest Association, which was one of those organizations that was selling the mycelium. You can see the birch tree getting drilled in the forehead. I was very happy about it. And then the plug going in, getting hammered in, sealing probably with like paraffin wax, and then a chaga being grown. So let me check my time here real quick. What time is it?
You've got 9 minutes to go. Okay. And there are some chats happening in the chat box when you're ready to.
Awesome. Okay. I'll try to wrap it up real quick. So I think that mushrooms are very important, and a lot of people are not taking them seriously because they just don't know about them. And we have this mycophobia in the West for some reason, where there's not a lot of education about them. And mushrooms can be an incredible solution to food insecurity, because they can grow on a variety of waste material. And they are not only a food source, but can be used to produce mycomaterials, which is, synthetic fabrics, building materials, insulation, that are all eco-friendly. And they also have the capacity to clean up toxic waste sites. There's a lot of research that's going on recently showing the ability to clean up diesel fuel sites. Like I said, they're extremely high in protein, nutrients, and other medicinal compounds, and they can actually grow at exponential rates once the mycelium is running. Once you have, 1 jar colonized of the mycelium, you can that 1 jar can create 10 more jars of grain spawn, which then you can transfer into a big bag of birch sawdust or leaf or whatever you're growing on, depending on the strain or the species that you're growing on. And Alaska has some of the best mushroom habitat. We have unique strains and extremely bountiful medicinal conchs. So chaga is just the popular one. And I think that's because of maybe marketing, and also it doesn't really taste very mushroomy because it's digested bark. It's pre-digested birch bark essentially. So that has more of an earthy, woody flavor. But these other conchs, this is the birch polypore, this is Felinus ignarius, this is the red-belted polypore, this is Fomes fomentarius, and this is turkey tail. All of these mushrooms that you find in the forest are extremely potent medicines and have been extensively studied. And I encourage everybody to do some research on these because they're bountiful and can really help people, especially in this time with viruses and whatnot. So, oh boy, I wish I could explain more. So this is another. I wish I had more time. This is a Hericium corolodius species that is growing on one of those old chaga fruit bodies. So chaga is not only symbiotic with the woodpecker and the beetle, but it actually creates a home for another medicinal gourmet mushroom called lion's mane, is the common name. And this mushroom has been shown to increase NGF, which is nerve growth factor in the brain, and help with the genesis of new brain cells and new connections of neurons in the brain. So it has huge potential for helping prevent and treat neurodegenerative disorders. So over here is a chaga that had gotten harvested. I was waiting for it to kill the tree, and it didn't produce a fruit body because somebody harvested it, but it still produced a lion's mane. So this is another incredible observation. So I want to give a shout out to, okay, do I need to stop? 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, let me escape here and share. This is my information if you guys want to get in touch and help at all. And my final points are that when we are doing this harvesting, we are showing the utmost respect to the forest. And within the context of sustainability, there's a lot of nuanced points. And I wish I had more time to get into that. But I believe that this could be used to teach other companies, other people in other places in the Arctic that aren't aware of this. And if we could prove this as a system, we could preserve this species from extinction. And I also want to acknowledge that there's a good chance that Native peoples have already known this, and it just has either been forgotten or I just don't know about it. So if any of you guys know anything along those lines, please share it with me. I'd love to know. And in fact, I don't even know how to say chaga in local Athabascan. So if any of you guys know how to say that, I would love to know how to regard this medicine in the native tongue. And like I said, I do run a foraging co-op and we are sharing and selling this medicine, but my motivation is not monetary. It's mostly I want people to understand how powerful this is and share it with people who need it. So in the future, as we grow this co-op, we are hoping to not only start mushroom farms, but build foragers cooperatives, farmer cooperatives that are owned by the farmers. I'm very interested in starting, food forests, endogenous berry farms, cultivating the natural existing environment to produce more. I always consider foraging like farming, except Mother Nature does half the work. And I hope to also prove that this is an economical argument for conservation, where there might actually be more money in harvesting these foods and making sure that they can get out to people who need them than just drilling for oil or cutting down all the trees for firewood. So that would also provide jobs and food security. So let me go back to my Hoova thing here. And any questions? Holy crap, 39 comments.
So, Callen, one of the things that's come up a couple times is getting your contact information.
Oh,
so
okay.
You just want to go ahead and put your email in the chat box so people can jot that down.
Yeah.
And then there are also some recommendations to get a hold of Glenna at the UAF, and her email's in the chat box. And then also Matt Bowser at the Kenai Wildlife Refuge as some context for you.
Okay.
And then also
right.
a Denina YouTube video, Store Outside Your Door series.
Awesome. Okay.
And then if you want to stop sharing your screen.
Okay.
So you should be able to, there should be a red bar up at the top. There we go. And we do have a couple more minutes if anyone wants to throw out a question. There was a lot of information in there. Well, thank you, Callen, for presenting today. And yeah, I think a lot of information, a lot of great stuff to think about. And I think you might be getting some emails or phone calls.
I hope so. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for putting this together and helping out. I'm very honored to be a part of this.
And it looks like it is time to move on to the 4:30. We have a minute. Jan, it looks like you are on. There you are.
Amy, would you like me to start now?
Yeah, do you want me to pull up your presentation from my end?
Yes, that would be great. And I really have so much enjoyed the first two presentations in this session. And it is really quite wonderful to be part of this conference, quite a thrill. And I appreciate Amy's heroic efforts to make it possible for me to participate this afternoon, because we are totally snowed in, and I was trying to get to the university to use the internet there. And so I just need to warn people that my connection is unstable and it may cut out. I'll probably get back to you, but if you could please turn off your video. That was something that Amy thought might be helpful, so that only the video and I guess my voice for right now. And then I look forward to wrapping up.
Are you still there, Jan? Hopefully we didn't lose her already. Well, I suppose until we get her back, if anyone wanted to chat with Callen a little more.
Oh,
are you back?
Sure, go. I can't see, I don't know if can you see anything on your screen?
I have the slide. Your presentation is pulled up. Are others able to see that?
Oh.
Can people see the?
Okay, so Amy, I'm just going to depend on you for if you'll be able to advance things. Oh, there it is. Great,
yeah, so if you let me know if you want me to change slides, I will be happy to do that.
Great, I'll just say next slide if that's okay. Thank you, Amy.
Yep.
Okay, so it's a pleasure to be here. I'll try to talk fast in case I get bumped off again. But Tapping to Spring is part of a program that's called One Tree Alaska, which is an integrated education, research, and community engagement program of the Institute of Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Extension. Okay, I think I'm back. Amy, can you hear me okay?
Yes, you're back now.
Okay, great, thank you. So we are part of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and our mission is to engage learners of all ages in boreal forest education, citizen science, and forest product development, because we see these as good ways to build informed citizens who can make good decisions and hopefully promote healthy communities, sustainable ecosystems, and food sovereignty and food security is a huge part of that. So we started tapping to spring, which uses the activity of tapping birch trees for sap in the spring before leaf out to help kids understand that trees manufacture sugar as food for the trees and food for the rest of us. The
Did we lose you again, Jan?
Okay, I'm wondering, Amy, is there a cell phone number that if I got bumped off, I'll just look at, I have my presentation.
Yeah. Did you get the number I sent you, the phone number?
Oh, the number, let's see. Is it the number for the Zoom, or what is that number?
It's a number you can call in from a phone line. And so we'd be able to hear you over the phone.
Hey, Amy, if I can hop in really quick,
Yeah.
This is Megan. Janice, I just dropped in the chat the phone number with the meeting ID and passcode that you can call in, but then your audio could be steadier since Amy is controlling your slides. You see that in the chat? Or maybe we lost her again. I'll try emailing her, Amy.
Yeah, and
I'm so sorry about this. Right now, I'm calling into that number, Amy.
Okay.
Oh, you're already on?
Well, I'm back with you on the Zoom.
Can you see the chat
okay.
with the phone number?
I just had to put in the meeting ID and pound.
Yeah, and then once you get on through the phone, if you want to make sure and mute your computer and turn the volume down on your computer so there's not feedback.
Okay, I think it got. Is the meeting ID the same as the password?
They're different. The meeting ID and the passcode, yeah.
Huh. I think I might need a new meeting ID, or should we just try to keep going? And the one that I entered, they said was invalid. I'm not sure.
Well, because I had a different one than Megan has. Why don't you keep talking? I will put it in the chat box, the meeting ID and password.
Okay. Okay, so we're still on the first slide. Yeah.
We're still on the first slide.
Okay, thank you. So really, basically, one tree is just about everything that you can do with a birch tree. And we do lots of inquiry experiments with K-12 classrooms and maker activities. And by far the most popular, well, I should say, we've been developing a K-8 spiraling curriculum called A Year in the Life of a Birch Tree. And that's because our science focus is on climate change and seasonality or phenology. And how does the lengthening growing season in interior Alaska affect the health and resilience of the local birch resource? So by far the most popular part of our program is, please, next slide, please, slide 2.
Okay.
Is called Tapping into Spring. And that's the spring focus, which, as I said before, uses the activity of processing birch sap to syrup as an activity to really explore how do trees make food for themselves and for us, what is involved, and what are the changes in the seasons that you can find. And as we go along, so typically the birch sap season is, as most of you already know, because a lot of you live in birch country, occurs in, usually it's in April and May. It can come even as early as the middle of March now, and as late as into May, the first initiation of sap flow. And it then takes usually about 3 weeks to accumulate enough warmth as the sun is coming back and the temperature Okay, back. So the sap season is during the first part of early spring before leaf out occurs. So it's always been the most popular time of the year. We started just in a few classrooms, and as we all know, schools are the way into communities, and this program spread, and from the kids in their classrooms, it spread back to their families who were interested. So excuse me, since 2016, we've had a birch sap cooperative, and typically there are about 50 to 60 households and classrooms that are a part of it. So that's how it usually goes. But then what happens is that people bring their sap to our facility on campus where we process it into syrup, and people, the cooperative part is they bring us sap and then return with
It looks like she got bumped off again. I guess if anyone has any questions for Callen, since he's still here. Or here comes Jan again. Jan, are you there?
Okay.
Hey,
I'm
Jan,
right back again.
Okay. And I did put the phone number and meeting ID and passcode that should work to get you into this room if you wanted to try calling in on a phone again.
Is it in the chat or in an email?
In the chat. It's also in an email from me, if that's easier for you to
Right,
access.
I tried the one that was in the email, and in the chat window, see, like right now I can't see anything in the chat window, but now the screen came, so maybe I can see the chat. Would you like me to try just phoning in, or should I just try to barrel through?
Megan, what do you think?
I think calling
Well-
in, if that second number could work, so
Yeah.
then your audio stays steady.
You know,
You could
if
try and see
somebody
if that other
wouldn't
ID
mind,
works.
you know, I think I'm going to have to ask somebody to, if somebody could read first of all the phone number, if you could read me these things. I can't go back and forth between the different screens here.
Oh, okay. Are
I'm
you?
sorry. I'm sorry this is so awkward.
It's the the challenges of Alaska in the winter.
It's really weird.
Are you ready, Jen? Are you ready for me to read the number?
I think we might have lost her again. Yeah, she was booted off.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm back and I'm not
Do you want me
able
to
to
read-
find.
Do you want me to read the number for you?
Yeah, please.
And did you try the meeting ID and passcode that I had emailed you earlier, or did you try the meeting ID and passcode that
Yes.
Okay. Then I
No,
will
no,
read.
I tried the one you had sent me first.
Okay. I'll read the one that Megan put in here then.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay, so it's 1253 215
Okay. Uh-huh.
8782.
Okay, I'm just calling that.
And then let me know when it gets
Okay,
to
now the meeting ID.
841.
The meeting ID, please.
841
841.
6615 514.
Is that it?
5140.
84166155140.
Yep, and then you'll probably have to hit the pound key.
Okay, and then the meeting passcode, please.
282521.
Oh, I'm in the meeting.
Okay. So then once you get on, your phone line is active on here. Okay, I see you on here, your phone. So if you mute your computer.
It's muted. Yep.
So to unmute the phone, I think you have to hit *6.
It's unmuted. Can you hear me?
It's unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I'm trying to make it so there's not feedback between the phone there. Okay, and then if you hit *6 on the phone. There, can you hear me?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then if you turn the
okay?
volume of your computer down. And then that should keep feedback from happening.
Are you hearing any feedback now?
No, that sounds good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody who's still there. I think we've lost a lot of people, and I don't blame them. It's the end of a great conference, and I apologize. We are just in this weird shadow here, and we go across our subdivision to a different road, and it's much better reception, but we're in a shadow. So we are
All right,
on the
well,
second slide.
Yeah, we'll take off from slide 2.
Slide 2, okay. And I'm going to try to look at slide 2 because I'm back on your screen, but I think I'll also pull up the PowerPoint and just work from it. Maybe that would be better. Okay, so that'll just take a second. So here we all are finally together on slide 2. Okay. So far what I've talked about is just what we do normally. We'll have 50 or 60 people, including usually about 10 or 12 classrooms, bring their sap to us at the university, the old Commons kitchen, which was abandoned when they built a new kitchen wing at the university. And it has all kinds of great facilities, equipment that allows us to process sap. So there's a cooler and freezer, and there's steam, which is a great resource to use if you have it available in the shoulder seasons, as the university does, to process the birch sap. So we use all kinds of energy to drive the reduction, the evaporation of sap to syrup. But we go literally from stem to steam in the Tilly Steam Studio. So things usually go that way, and we work with the cooperative, return 20% of what they brought to them in the form of syrup. But then the pandemic hit. So if you go to slide 3, please.
Okay.
And I just want to start this part by saying that last weekend I was talking with my daughter Rachel and telling her about the conference and that I was going to get a chance to participate in it. And I was wondering how to lead into talking about lessons learned from tapping into spring in a time of coronavirus, which is what I'm trying to get across in this presentation. And she said something that seemed to me to be a great lead into talking about the lessons learned. And she said that last March, as the pandemic was throwing the world into question and shutting it down, she thought to herself, and these are her words now, oh, Mom will finally slow down for a second. Nothing ever gets her to slow down, but the pandemic will finally force her to do that. But I was dead wrong. And Rachel was right. Instead of slowing down, we had to ramp up. And so the first lesson of the pandemic was that it really forced One Tree to clarify our mission. And we're busy 12 months of the year doing things, making things, doing science experiments, but it always comes back to the kids and the teachers and how to support them. And so the pandemic made that absolutely necessary. And by the middle of March, we knew that everything was going to be remote learning for the last part of the school year, and that was the part we're tapping into spring. So we had to pivot. Rather than having 50 to 60 members of the SAP cooperative bring their SAP to us, we had to change and produce SAP kits in a SAP bucket with everything that was needed, from drill bits and tapping instructions and sterile measuring cups and instructions for all the students who would have been in the classroom and for members of the SAP cooperative. So this is just to show our SAP kits ready to go out the door. At the beginning, it was a very lonely work because the university was shut down and only one person was allowed inside the building, and that was me. And so it took a long time to get everything prepared. But right then, just in the week before distributing all of these tapping kits, we were allowed to bring our SAP crew back outside to help to bag things up, and we got them out to about 12 classrooms and then a bunch of homeschool families and the rest of the cooperative. So if you go on, please, to the next slide.
Okay.
We learned a lot of lessons from having done this, lessons that we never would have learned otherwise. Some of the lessons were for the people who had been just bringing their sap to us and then, passively letting us produce the syrup, and then they would take it home. So I'm not sure, have you gone on to the slide beyond the one that shows all the tapping kits?
I'm on the one that has the jars.
Right. Okay, great. Thank you. That's the right one. And that's, you can read the words from Theodora. They are really gung-ho backyard tappers, but had never produced their own syrup before. And so this was their main and run. They had to do it. And this is what she produced, and we'll be distributing to family and friends for the holidays. So broad participation also meant broadening the number of people who, if they wanted to have syrup, needed to produce it on their own. Then if you go on to the next slide.
Okay.
It also very much deepened learning. And that was just because there were families now. Instead of one tree or two trees being worked on with a K-12 classroom, now everybody in that classroom who wanted to participate was taking a sap kit home and working with their families. So instead of working with about 250 to 300 people, we were working with whole families, which brought it up to something like 1,200 people, maybe a bit more than that. And it also became a really ideal activity for homeschoolers. So you can read here about one family that got really inspired by doing some research online and finding out about some other uses for sap, and are making plans for how they're going to ramp up their production next year. Those were really some of the great lessons for people who had been before just bringing their material to us. But we then got to have some more lessons for One Tree for us as a program. And that's because if you go on to the next slide, please.
Okay.
The third lesson is for us, is that we had to be able to function more efficiently. And oh, I need to mention something here. We distributed the SAP kits, and right up to that point where we were distributing them, the university was shut down. There was no research allowed at the university whatsoever. But then things shifted. They shifted in a matter of 24 or 48 hours when it was found that the university had much more stringent restrictions on research than any of the land-grant universities in the Pacific Northwest. So some changes were made, and a little bit of research was allowed to continue. And we were really lucky at One Tree that our unit and the university said, okay, we're going to allow you to produce birch syrup again, as you've done before, at the Tilly, but you can only have one person working at a time, and you have to really limit the number of people that you're working with. And so what we did is we shifted from doing individual buckets to ordering a lot of tubing from Kahiltna Birch Works. They're the biggest birch syrup producers in the United States, and a lot of you know Dulcie and Michael. So we ordered tubing from them, and with the help of the SAP crew featured here, we went out and worked with one neighborhood, 4 different landowners, tapped about 400 trees, and just created long shifts because we could only have one person in the production facility at a time. So we would go make a sap run, bring it back to the Tilly, and then start to produce it. Really, this was great in that it taught us how to streamline our harvesting, and to do so in a way that we were following the best practices from different birch producers who have been doing tubing for a long time. We had done some tubing, but we really ramped up this year. And then if you go on to the next slide.
Okay.
By working just with a few landowners and limiting our coronavirus prone activities to just not working with anybody except ourselves and using all the COVID-19 precautions, we were able to harvest 4,500 gallons of sap from those trees and on the 4 landowners' land. And I'm not sure if you're on what slide you're on, but the one I'm thinking about has a picture of birch syrup. And the effect of it was that we are right now starting up again. We've produced about 18 gallons of syrup so far, and we think that we'll be able to produce 40 gallons of syrup and then a whole bunch of caramel. It's fresh caramel season, and it's really fun to be in the chili. So lots less. It's not as much fun without the sap cooperative, but we were able to push through and be able to have a successful, really our most successful sap season in terms of really streamlining production. So there's a lot to learn and write up from what we've learned about that. Then those were the main things that we learned from us. But beyond that, if you go on to the next, okay, so there's that shows the top of one of our little jars. And if you go on to the next one, the lessons from pivoting outward, from not having just a few people in the community bringing us sap, but from facing outward and to really involving people. And I wish I'd been able to share some of the educational materials that we were sending out with the tapping kits. Everybody who was involved was taking daily sap flow measurements at the same time every day. They were also noting the initial day of sap flow at their house, when they had peak flow, and when their sap turned cloudy, which signals the end of the season. When it turns cloudy, there's yeast growing in the sap, which means there's just the slightest little bit of photosynthesis already starting up in the tree as the buds are just beginning to pop free of the scales and open up. So at that point, we like to pull taps out of the tree. So what this did, getting 1,000 or more people involved in this, was a great way to involve them in firsthand looking at what we've been working on all along, which is to look at seasonality and to look at asking kids, well, how do plants and animals tell time? Because that's the basic question. And they very quickly come to know that it's, of course, not a calendar, of course it's not a clock, but that all organisms are sensing, in this case, the return of the sun and the warming up. And so they were coming to understand that it's the daily accumulation of heat that's driving trees to release from dormancy. So that's what they were learning how to do, is to log the maximum temperature day, take the base temperature, freezing 32 away from it, and accumulate the number of degree days above freezing every day, adding it in. And they all were able to see that when you get to about 200 degree days, 200 degrees accumulated over freezing, that's when sap flow begins. This is a graph that was produced by Rick Homan, a climate scientist at the university. And he's put on here where the star in the middle shows when sap flow began. And it turns out, we've been tracking this really for a number of years, that there's an algorithm that can explain to us by having a reference stand on Chena Ridge. We can see, the meteorologists can see, and the climate scientists, when the hillside turns green, when it goes to green up. And Rick and his work partner, Ted Fathauer, who died several years ago, had developed an algorithm that showed them how many days accumulation of warmth it takes and what the effect of having a really hot day early in the season versus late in the season, how that all influences when the trees go to leaf out. So what we've been finding in a limited way is that the sap season very well corresponds to this. If you go on to the next slide.
Okay.
It shows, it's a thermometer bulb up there for
Yes.
people to see?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. So that, the thermometer bulb is something that's really, has proved to be kind of exciting and pretty accessible and easy for kids to understand when they are in different parts of the sap season. So they're looking at spring not by calendar days only, but very much by looking at the accumulation of warmth and what that has to do with the quality and quantity of sap. So what's really exciting to us from a program point of view, first and foremost, are all of the educational bonuses of having been forced by coronavirus to, instead of having people bring us sap, was to send out kits to them and start working with them about the scientific concepts behind what drives the sap season. And a lot of people have gotten involved. One is Susan Harry, who is the pollen counter, who posts all the allergy information on, I'm going to say the wrong name of the site. I think of it as Banner Health. But anyway, we are beginning to look at how can the same approach be used to look at when pollen's going to come, and how can these seasonal, these 30-day and 3-month projections of whether we can expect warm temperatures and really what the temperature is going to be, we can begin to be more accurate about predicting when the allergy season is going to start. And so there are people at the University of Alaska Anchorage who are also interested in starting to use this approach of looking at accumulating warmth and helping to understand when other biological phenomena are going. We're also beginning to have, so we asked all of the people who were tapping with us, and I see that I've gone over my time. I'm so sorry.
And actually,
I'll just wrap it up real fast.
Since we were a little bit of a rocky start, if you could wrap up about 5-10. So if you took another few minutes.
Just a few minutes. Okay. So what I think that the key thing I'm trying to say here is that the science concepts behind what we've been looking at with the sap season. So on the one hand, we're really interested in making tasty syrup and caramels and selling them to sustain the program. And on the other hand, we're really interested in how does this approach, can it help us? It's an open question of, can it help us to look at other agriculture and natural resource phenomena and how it relates to degree days. And not everything we'll be able to, but the peony farmers are interested in perhaps beginning to use this method of looking at accumulating warmth. Definitely the Birch pollen, public health, medical people. And really, I just would like to stop now and open this up, because this takes us to really the last point of the presentation, which is the last slide, I think, slide 10, that showed the top of our,
the top of the chart.
Is that we've been developing this, first as an education project, second as a research interest, third as forest product development. We are very happy to have been able to 2 times enter the world competition for birch syrup production, and we're thrilled to have won it twice. But we're not the only ones. Alaska has a lot of good producers and good producers coming on. There's room for small scale, artisanal producers of birch syrup to come along and to help define the industry here in Alaska and across the United States. We're working a little bit with our counterparts in Russia, but we need all of the help of all of you who have put together this conference and who are attending it. People who know how to put together business plans, how to do marketing, and how to sustain healthy communities and ecosystems. We're all in this together, and thank you so much for sticking with me through this. I don't know if there are any questions, but I really appreciate your patience and letting us participate.
Yeah, we'll open it up to any questions. And I just appreciate you, Jan, for being patient and even though you've had a rough day, taking the time to come in and chat with us.
Oh, thank you. I wish I'd been able, if I'd been able to get to the university, this would have been smooth. But thank you for letting me participate from home and being snowed in.
Yeah, I found this information very interesting. But we'll give it, if anyone has a question, question or comment. And I think all of our presenters, these are recorded and contact information is out there if anyone wants to reach out later. But yeah, we'll go ahead and give everyone a few minutes break before coming back in for the closing in the main room.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Well, it looks like we might. Did we have a question? Oh, here, there's something in the chat box. Oh, just a thank you. So yeah, thank you, Jan, for making the effort to call in so we can see your presentation.
Thanks, Amy, for all of your efforts, and you guys are great. Okay.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and sign out of room D, room 4.
Bye-bye. Thank you.